This story begins with an ending. It's about the last promise I ever made to my husband, David, and the first secret I ever uncovered about him. My name is Naomi, and for 17 years I was married to a man who was my anchor, my steady ground. David was an engineer. He believed in logic, in things he could measure and prove. Our life was built on a foundation of quiet routines and deep, unshakable trust. Or so I believed. When the massive stroke took him, it was like a silent earthquake that shattered my world without a sound. One moment he was there, the solid center of my universe, and the next, he was gone. I was 58, a widow, our daughter Chloe was away at college, and the house we had built our life in felt cavernous, filled with a silence that was louder than any noise. The weeks that followed were a blur of muted colors and hollow motions. I'd find myself setting the table for two out of habit. I'd wake in the night and reach for his side of the bed, only to find cold sheets. Grief is a peculiar thief. It doesn't just take the person. It takes the future you thought you had, the 1,000 small tomorrows you had taken for granted. But David, it turned out, was a man of beautiful, heartbreaking surprises. 2 months after the funeral, his attorney, Mr. Harrison, called me into his office. The room smelled of polished wood and old paper, a scent of formality and finality. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice soft with a practiced sympathy, "David left specific instructions that this was only to be delivered to you after his passing." My hands trembled as I reached for them. The box was heavier than it looked. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was an antique key. It was brass, aged to a soft patina, with a weight that felt significant in my palm. Attached to it was a simple keychain, a piece of metal shaped like an oak leaf. It felt ancient and full of stories I knew nothing about. The envelope bore my name in David's unmistakable handwriting, that strong, precise script I knew so well. Just seeing it made my throat tighten. "What is this key for?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's for a property in Lake Arrowhead," he explained, "a place called Crestwood Estate. Your husband purchased it approximately 4 years ago, but he left explicit instructions that you were only to learn about it after his death." My mind reeled. Lake Arrowhead? David didn't own any other properties. He never mentioned a country retreat. He never mentioned any childhood home. In fact, the few times I had gently broached the subject of his early years, a shudder would come down behind his eyes. "It was a long time ago, Naomi," he'd say, and deftly change the subject. The mere mention of Lake Arrowhead could make his shoulders tense. But there was more, a deeper, more painful contradiction that made my heart ache. I remembered with crystal clarity his final moments in that sterile hospital room, the weak squeeze of his hand, the desperate plea in his fading eyes. "Please don't go to the retreat property, Naomi. Promise me." I had promised. Through my tears, I had given him my word. I had always respected his wishes, even when I didn't understand them. It was part of the fabric of our trust. So why? Why reveal its existence now? Why give me the key to a place he had begged me to stay away from? "It gets more complicated," Mr. Harrison continued, adjusting his glasses. "The property has become extremely valuable. A large developer, Summit Resorts, is building in the area. They've made several offers for the house, in the multi-millions." Multi-millions? David was an engineer. I was a literature professor. We were comfortable, but this was a level of wealth I couldn't comprehend. "And there's another complication," he added gently.
David's family is contesting the will. His brother, Marcus Sterling, is alleging that David was not mentally capable when he purchased the property. A hot flash of protective anger surged through me. "That's absurd," I said, my voice finding its strength. "My husband was the most lucid, centered person I've ever known, even at the end." The attorney simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the legal storm that was brewing. With trembling fingers, I finally opened the envelope. The sight of his handwriting, a message from beyond, undid me. "My dearest Naomi," it began, and I had to press the paper to my chest for a moment to steady myself.
If you are reading this, it means I left sooner than I expected. Forgive me for all the secrets I kept. The house is yours now. Over the past 4 years, I transformed that somber place from my childhood into something I hope you find beautiful. I know I made you promise never to go there. I am undoing that promise now. In fact, I ask you to go just once before you decide what to do with the property. In the house's study, you will find my laptop. The password is the date of our first meeting, followed by hope. The word you taught me to feel again. I love you more than I could ever express. David. Tears blurred the final words. Even in death, he was guiding me, surprising me, loving me. He spoke of transformation, of beauty, of hope, and he was pointing me toward a secret he had kept for 4 years. I looked up at the heavy, antique key in my hand. It felt no longer like just a piece of metal, but a threshold, a doorway to the hidden chapters of the man I loved. I looked up at Mr. Harrison, a new, fierce determination settling in my soul. "I need to see this place," I said, my voice clear and firm. "There is a legal," he began. "I know," I interrupted, standing up. "But my husband left me a key, and he asked me to go, so I'm going to Lake Arrowhead, today." I placed the key and the letter carefully into my purse. The weight of it felt monumental. I was about to break the last promise I ever made to David, to honor a final request he made from the grave. I was walking into the heart of his greatest secret, armed with nothing but a key and a love that I was only just beginning to understand was deeper and more complex than I had ever imagined. I was driving toward Lake Arrowhead, a heavy key in my purse and a heart full of questions. The man I had loved for 17 years had left me a map to a part of his soul he had always kept locked away. I was about to turn the key. The drive through the Cascade Range was a journey through a fading memory. The towering pines and crisp mountain air felt both foreign and strangely familiar, as if I were traveling through a dream David had once described, but I had long forgotten. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my mind racing. What was I about to find? A neglected cabin? A modest retreat? Nothing could have prepared me for Crestwood Estate. The carved wooden gate, marked with its name in wrought iron, was imposing. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid the antique key into the lock. It turned with a deep, satisfying clunk that echoed in the silent forest. The gate swung inward, and I caught my first glimpse. It wasn't a house. It was a sanctuary. A stunning mansion of stone and timber stood proudly amidst immaculate gardens, ancient oak trees standing as silent sentinels. A graceful stone path wound its way through lawns so perfect they looked painted. This was not the somber place David had written of. This was a property transformed with an almost sacred dedication. Every stone, every flowering bush whispered of my husband's hands, his secret labor of love. Stepping through the main door, the air left my lungs in a soft gasp. The entrance opened into a grand, double-height living room with a magnificent stone fireplace, but it wasn't the architecture that stole my breath. It was the walls. They were covered in paintings, dozens of them, and every single one was of orchids,
My orchids, my lifelong passion, delicate moth orchids, cascading cattleyas, the rare and elusive slipper orchids, they were all there, rendered in breathtaking detail and vibrant color. David, the pragmatic engineer who could barely tell a rose from a daisy, had surrounded me with a gallery of my greatest love. It was a love letter written in brushstrokes, a testament to how deeply he had been paying attention all those years. He hadn't just tolerated my hobby, he had cherished it. And there, on a table by a large window overlooking the gardens, sat a silver laptop. Resting on its lid, as if placed there just for me, was a single, pristine white orchid. It felt like a welcome and a promise. But that sacred moment of discovery was shattered by the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. My heart leapt into my throat. Through the window, I saw a black SUV pull up behind my car. 3 men got out. Even from a distance, the resemblance was uncanny. The same straight nose, the same determined set of the jaw, the same almond-shaped eyes that I had loved in David. The Sterling brothers, Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah. They moved with a swagger that spoke of ownership, their expressions severe and unyielding. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. I quickly closed the heavy front door, the lock clicking into place, feeling flimsy against their presence. I watched from the side window as they marched to the porch. Marcus, the eldest, a graying, harder version of my David, didn't bother with the doorbell. His fist landed on the wood with a pound that made me jump. "Mrs. Anami," he voiced, devoid of warmth, "we know you're in there. We need to talk." I pressed my back against the wall, my breath coming in shallow gasps. David's vague, emphatic warnings about his family echoed in my mind. He said, "They're not like us, Naomi. It's best we keep our distance." Now facing them, every instinct screamed that these men were not here for a family reunion.
The pounding came again, more insistent. "Naomi, I'm Marcus Sterling, David's brother. These are my brothers, Elijah and Isaiah. We're here about the property." The property, of course. They weren't here for David's widow. They were here for the house that was suddenly worth millions. My eyes darted back to the laptop. David's words from the letter echoed. The answers are on the laptop. My answers weren't with these angry men on the porch. They were in that machine. Ignoring their increasingly aggressive knocks, I moved to the table. My hands trembled as I opened the laptop. The screen glowed to life. I typed the password, the one he said I taught him. October 12, 96, Hope. The screen resolved into a video file. And there he was. My David. Not the pale, fragile man from the hospital, but my David, healthy, his eyes crinkling with that familiar, gentle smile. The sight was so visceral, so heartbreakingly real, that a sob caught in my throat. "Hello, my love," he said, and his voice, clear and strong, filled the room, a stark contrast to the muffled demands from outside. "You watching this, it means I'm gone, and you came to Crestwood, despite my years of begging you not to do so." He gave a soft, knowing chuckle. "I should have guessed you wouldn't resist, especially after Harrison told you about the house." He knew me, even now, from beyond. He knew my curiosity, my need for answers. "I recorded one video for every day of your first year without me. A year of companionship while you process the grief. A year explaining everything I should have told you in life." He took a breath, his face growing serious. "I'll start with why I bought back the house I swore I would never set foot in again." Outside, the pounding had stopped. I risked a glance through the window and saw the brothers huddled by their SUV, talking on phones, their gestures sharp and frustrated. They were planning their next move. David's voice drew me back. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a cerebral aneurysm,
a ticking bomb I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. The world tilted. The air grew thick. He was sick? For 3 years? He had hidden a terminal diagnosis from me? From Chloe? He had let us live in blissful ignorance while he carried this immense, terrifying secret alone. "I chose not to tell you," he said, as if he could see the turmoil on my face. "You have every right to be, but I hope you understand I made that decision out of love, not cowardice."
The men outside were getting back into their SUV, but my relief was short-lived. A county police cruiser was now turning into the driveway. The brothers had called the law. David's face on the screen hardened. What my brothers don't know is that I legally bought this house from my father before he died. The old man was bankrupt. He sold it to me for a fraction of its value, desperate for money, making me swear not to tell my brothers who still thought they would inherit it. So that was the heart of their legal challenge. They believed they had a right to what David had legitimately purchased. "The house was in ruins when I bought it, Naomi," he said, his gaze sweeping around as if he could see the beautiful room we were in. "Just like my childhood here. But this time, I had the resources to transform it. Every business trip over the last 4 years, I was here, overseeing renovations, building something for you." Outside, the officer was speaking with the brothers. One of them, Elijah, held up a document, pointing toward the house. "My brothers will come for it." David's voice was firm, urgent. They never wanted the house until last year when the resort project began. Suddenly, the worthless property they mocked me for buying became a gold mine. They will try anything to take it from you. He was predicting it all as it was happening in real time. In the bottom drawer of this table is a blue folder with all the legal documents you need. The house is unquestionably yours. I made sure of it. His face softened again. "But Naomi, whether you keep it or sell it is entirely your choice. I built this place for you. I filled it with beauty for you. But I don't want it to become a burden." A sharp, authoritative knock rattled the front door. "Mrs. Sterling, county officer, we need you to open the door, please." The video ended, freezing on David's smiling, hopeful face. The silence he left behind was deafening, filled now with the sound of my own frantic heartbeat and the official demand at the door. I closed the laptop, my hands steadying with a newfound resolve. I found the blue folder, just as he said. It felt like a shield. As I reached for the doorknob, my cell phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Chloe, calling from college. A mother's instinct is a powerful thing. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about Dad's house or the developer's proposal? The uncles just called me. They're offering a fair deal if I help them contest the will. What the heck is going on?" The floor seemed to drop away. They hadn't just come from me. They had gone straight for my daughter, for David's daughter. They were using her grief, her vulnerability to get to the one thing David had left for us. That perception, that violation, ignited something fierce and primal inside me. This was no longer just about a property. This was about my family. "I'll explain everything later, I promise," I said, my voice surprisingly calm as I watched the officer through the window. "But Chloe, listen to me. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Those men are not our friends." "Mom, if there's money involved—" "This is not about money," I interrupted, the firmness in my own voice surprising me. "It's about what your father wanted. Please, trust me." After a moment of heavy silence, she sighed. Okay, but call me as soon as you can. I hung up, the protective fury now a cold, hard stone in my chest. They had crossed a line. I took a deep breath, clutching David's blue folder like a weapon. Then I opened the door to face the ghosts of his past and to fight for the future he had tried to give us.
The silence after the brothers' first retreat was deceptive. It wasn't peace. It was the eye of the hurricane. I spent that first night in David's house, our house, surrounded by the ghost of his love, but sleep was a foreign country. My mind was a war room itself, replaying David's confession, Chloe's betrayed voice on the phone, and the brothers' venomous stares. The beautiful walls felt like they were closing in, a gilded cage under siege. At dawn, I wandered, a ghost in this magnificent gift. I found myself drawn to the conservatory David had mentioned. Pushing the glass door open, the air, humid and fragrant, wrapped around me like an embrace. And then I saw it. A symphony of color and life. Orchids of every conceivable shape and hue cascaded from shelves, perched on mossy logs, their delicate faces turned toward the morning light. And there, in a place of honor, was the Cattleya, the blue orchid I had marveled at a decade ago at an Atlanta show. I had mentioned it only once. David had not only remembered, he had spent years searching for it, cultivating it, for me. It's his favorite too, or it was. The voice, gentle but firm, came from behind a spray of delicate white phalaenopsis. A woman emerged, wiping her hands on a cloth. She had kind, knowing eyes that seemed to hold their own stories. "I'm Miss Jackson. Your husband hired me to care for them. He said you had a special touch with plants that he could never quite match. Did you know him well?" I asked, the question feeling both desperate and necessary. "As well as he allowed," she said, her gaze softening. "He was here most months, overseeing every detail. In the last 6 months, he worked like a man possessed, like he was racing against the clock he alone could hear." The confirmation was a fresh wound. While I was grading papers and worrying about mundane things, my husband was here, dying and building me a paradise. "His brothers were here yesterday," I ventured, watching her closely. Her face hardened instantly. Vultures. They started circling the moment they caught the scent of money from that resort. They hadn't set foot here in 30 years, but suddenly, it's the precious family homestead. She looked at me, her expression grave. "They will be back, Mrs. Sterling, and they won't be as polite." Back in the house, clinging to a fragile hope, I opened the next video. David was in the library, a fire crackling in the hearth behind him. "Good morning, my love. I hope you slept well in our new home." The familiar ache returned. "Today, I want to show you something special, just for you." The camera followed him as he walked to a locked door at the end of the east wing. "The key is in the top drawer of the nightstand, the silver one, with the orchid." Heart pounding with a new kind of anticipation, I retrieved the beautiful, intricate key. It turned smoothly in the lock. I pushed the door open, and my legs nearly gave way. It was an artist studio, a real studio, bathed in perfect, diffused northern light from floor to ceiling windows. Easels stood at the ready. Shelves were lined with tubes of paint, not the student-grade ones I'd used years ago, but professional pigments with names like cobalt blue and quinacridone gold. Brushes, clean and waiting, stood in jars like soldiers ready for duty. I hadn't painted in 15 years. I had buried that dream to build a practical life, to support David's career, to raise Chloe.
someday had become a ghost. David's voice continued from the laptop I'd carried with me. You gave up so much for us, Naomi. Your painting was the first sacrifice. I always promised myself I would give it back to you. Tears blurred the beautiful, cruel room. This was too much. It was a love letter that highlighted every loss. There's one more thing, David said. Look in the cabinet beneath the window bench. I walked to the cushioned seat, finding a discreet cabinet. Inside was a flat archival box. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid and I fell to my knees. My paintings, dozens of them, every piece I created in college, every sketchbook, every fragment of my youthful soul I thought was lost to moves and time. David had secretly saved them all, preserved them. On top was my final self-portrait, the eyes of the young woman I once was staring out, bright with the future she thought was certain. A note was tucked into the frame. She's still in there, Naomi. The woman who painted with such passion and vision. I gave you the space. The rest is up to you, David. I pressed the note to my chest, weeping. He saw me. He truly saw the core of me, the part I had silenced for so long. Screech! The sound of tires on gravel, aggressive and sudden, tore through the moment. From the studio window, my heart plummeted. 2 SUVs, the brothers, black one, and behind it, Chloe's silver car. I watched, frozen, as my daughter stepped out, my brilliant, grieving Chloe. And she was smiling, shaking Marcus's hand, then Elijah's. She was laughing at something Isaiah said. They had her. In less than 48 hours, they had sunk their claws into my daughter, using her grief and her desire for connection as a weapon.
My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. I'm here with Uncle Marcus and the others. Coming in now. We need to talk. Uncle Marcus? The term of endearment felt like a betrayal. I met them in the living room, my back straight. David's note, a secret shield in my pocket. Mom, this place is incredible, Chloe said, her eyes wide, but avoiding mine. Why did Dad never tell us? Before I could answer, Marcus stepped forward, his smile a practiced mask. Naomi, we started off on the wrong foot. We're family. Let's talk like one. They presented their generous offer, a 3-way split. They were so confident, so smug. And Chloe, my own daughter, looked at me with hopeful eyes, already convinced. It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge place. Dad's family stays united. When I refused, Marcus's mask slipped. This property is worth tens of millions of dollars. We can do this amicably, or we can make things very difficult. You're a literature professor. We have resources. The threat hung in the air, but it only solidified my resolve. I believe my husband knew exactly what he was doing, I said, my voice ice calm. Now, please, leave. Chloe chose to go with them. Watching her walk away with them was the second most painful moment of my life, second only to watching David take his last breath. As their cars disappeared, Miss Jackson appeared at my side. Mrs. Sterling, she said quietly, there's something else, something your husband asked me to show you only if it became necessary. She led me to a dilapidated tool shed, a stark contrast to the rest of the pristine property. Inside, she moved aside crates to reveal a hidden trapdoor. She called this the vault. We descended into a concrete bunker. When the lights flickered on, I gasped. It was David's war room. Maps covered the walls, not just of the property, but of the entire valley, overlaid with the true, monstrous scale of the Summit Resorts project, a massive golf course and spa complex that was entirely dependent on the western portion of my land. File cabinets were stuffed with evidence, decades of his brother's fraud, tax evasion, insider trading. It was an arsenal. He knew they would come, Miss Jackson said. He wanted you to have ammunition. I saw it then. The whole brilliant, heartbreaking strategy. He wasn't just building me a sanctuary. He was fortifying a castle and arming its queen for a war he knew was inevitable. He anticipated everything, I whispered. Not everything, Miss Jackson replied softly. He didn't expect them to get to your daughter so quickly. That was the turning point. Grief was replaced by a cold, clear fury. They had tried to take my husband's legacy, my home, and now my daughter? It was time to fight back. Miss Jackson, I said, my voice firm with a newfound authority, I need to watch the next videos. Then I need you to schedule meetings. First with Chloe, alone, then with my attorney, and finally, I said, looking at the wall of evidence, I think I'd like to have a conversation with the CEO of Summit Resorts. The plan unfolded with military precision. I met Chloe at a neutral cafe, away from the brothers' influence. I showed her the video David made for her where he revealed their true nature, the fraud, the threats. Watching her father's face, hearing his voice break as he explained his protective distance, shattered the illusion they'd built. The confusion in her eyes melted into a blazing, determined fire. They're trying to con us, she whispered, her hand finding mine across the table. We were a team again. The final confrontation was a masterpiece of David's planning and my execution. The brothers arrived, smug with their financial advisor in tow, expecting a surrender. They found a boardroom-style setup in my dining room and a widow in a tailored suit. I revealed everything, the true resort plans, the evidence of their crimes, and then, my masterstroke, I introduced Mr. Alliston, the CEO of Summit Resorts, who had been waiting in the wings. He was far more interested in dealing with the legitimate, fully informed owner. I watched, a quiet victor, as their faces paled, their confidence crumbled, and their entire world unraveled at my dining room table. They were exposed, outmaneuvered, and legally neutered. As they slunk away utterly defeated, I stood with Chloe and Miss Jackson. The house was safe, but more than that, I was safe. The woman David believed I could be had finally stepped into the light, forged in the fire of his love and his brother's greed. The war was over. Now it was time to live. The silence that settled over Crestwood Estate after the brothers' defeat was not an empty one. It was a profound and resonant peace, like the final sustaining chord of a great symphony. The air itself felt cleaner, the light purer. The house was no longer a fortress under siege. It was a home, breathing freely for the first time, its walls seeming to sigh in relief. Chloe and I fell into a new, healing rhythm. Every evening, as the sun dipped behind the Cascade Range, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, we would curl up on the large sofa in the great room, our room, and watch one of David's daily videos. They were no longer messages from a ghost, but conversations with a father, a husband. He told her stories of his youth that he'd been too pained to share before, explained his love for botany, and offered quiet fatherly advice about life and courage. Each video was a thread, patiently stitching the tapestry of our family back together, weaving David into the fabric of Chloe's life in a way his physical presence never could. I watched my daughter blossom in this new light. The defensive, manipulated young woman was gone, replaced by a more mature, centered version of herself. She began spending weekends in the conservatory with Miss Jackson. Her hands, so like her father's, learning the delicate art of tending to his orchids. It was her way of connecting with him, of understanding the man who had loved her so fiercely from a distance. But the most profound gift, the one that truly held the key to my future, was waiting in that sun-drenched room at the end of the East Wing, the art studio. For the first few days, I would simply stand at its threshold, overwhelmed by its potential. The blank canvases were like silent accusations, reminding me of the dream I'd abandoned. Then one morning, driven by a force I can only describe as David's gentle nudging from beyond, I picked up a brush. The first strokes on the canvas were timid, clumsy. The paint felt foreign, the colors hesitant. I was trying to paint an orchid, but my hands seemed to have forgotten the language of my heart. Frustration welled up, and I nearly threw the brush down. But I thought of David's note. "She's still in there, Naomi." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let my hand move not from memory, but from feeling. From the joy I felt walking into the conservatory, from the ache of losing David, from the fierce love I felt for Chloe. I stopped trying to paint a flower and started trying to paint an emotion.
And something broke open. A forgotten joy, fierce and beautiful, began to flow from my heart, down my arm and onto the canvas. It was a visceral, physical need being met after years of starvation. I painted for hours, losing all track of time, the world outside the windows fading away. I was no longer a widow, a professor, or a strategist. I was an artist. I was me. My first major piece was a large canvas for the great room. It wasn't a literal portrait, but a triptych of our story. One panel showed the raw, wild land, the foundation of everything. The second depicted the painful, intricate architecture of the past, the secrets, the sorrow, the Sterling family's shadow. The third, and largest, was a vibrant explosion of the present and future, our hopes and dreams, with the faint, loving images of David, Chloe, and me woven into the very landscape of the estate. It was not a portrait of a person, but a portrait of a legacy. Weeks later, as the autumn leaves began to turn to fire, I received an unexpected visitor. Miss Jackson found me in the studio, my hands smudged with cerulean blue. "Marcus Sterling is here," she said, her voice cautious. "Alone." My body tensed instantly, but her next words surprised me. "He has no documents. He looks different." I met him on the porch, the same porch where he had once pounded with such arrogance. The man who stood before me was a diminished version of that titan. His suit hung loosely on his frame, and the lines on his face were carved not just by time, but by pain. "Naomi," he began, his voice stripped of its former authority. "Thank you for seeing me. I'm not here to contest anything." He looked out at the property, his gaze distant. "I'm here to apologize." I waited, my arms crossed, my guard still half raised. I've had a lot of time to think," he swallowed hard. "About David, about the choices I made." He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw genuine remorse there. "I have cancer, Naomi. Stage 4. It puts things in perspective." The echo of David's own hidden illness was a blow to the heart. The symmetry was cruel and undeniable. "He didn't come for sympathy," he continued, seeing the shock on my face. "I came because my little brother built something beautiful here, and I, in my arrogance and greed, almost destroyed it." He pulled a small, faded photograph from his pocket and handed it to me. "I found this in our father's things. I thought you should have it."
It was a picture of 3 boys under the massive oak tree by the lake. The smallest one, David, couldn't have been more than 10, was clutching a tiny potted orchid, a look of pure, unguarded wonder on his face. "It was the first one he ever grew," Marcus whispered, the guilt raw in his voice. "Before he couldn't finish." I looked from the photograph of the joyful boy to the broken man before me, and in that moment, the last of my anger released its hold. Holding on to it would have been a poison in my sanctuary. Forgiveness wouldn't rewrite the past, but it would free me from its chains. "Would you like to see the conservatory?" I asked, the offer surprising us both. David cultivated some truly magnificent orchids. For a moment, he seemed unable to speak. Then, with an almost imperceptible nod, he followed me into the glass house his brother had built. As we walked among the vibrant, living legacies of David's love, I saw not a villain, but a tormented man finally facing the ruins of his own making. True legacy, I realized, wasn't just about protecting what you have. It was about the profound, courageous capacity to heal. That night, I was finally ready. I watched David's final video. He was sitting in my studio, in the very chair I now used. "This is the end of our daily journey together, my love," he began, his face a map of peace and quiet pride. "A year of messages to guide you through the first months without me, but it's not the end of us." He paused, looking into the camera as if he could truly see me. "We continue in the decisions you will make, in the love you and Chloe share, in the beauty you will create from here on out. The house I feared for so long is now yours to transform. The secret I kept has become your gift." His smile was gentle, full of an unshakable faith. "The promise I asked you to make and then released you from was the key to your own liberation. Never forget, Naomi, you were always the true strength between us. Until someday, my love." The screen went dark, and in the deep, resonant silence that followed, I found not just loss, but a boundless sense of possibility. The house David had asked me never to visit had become my home. The secrets he kept had transformed into my strength. I rose and walked to the large painting in the great room. I saw the layers of past, present, and future I had created. David had done more than leave me a property and a fortune. He had given me the ultimate gift, the freedom to rediscover and reinvent myself, to become the woman he always saw hiding within me. The house he built from a place of fear had become the home where I finally, fully, and joyfully became myself. My dear friends, thank you for sharing this journey with me. My story is not a tragedy. It is a testament to a love that endures beyond death, a love that believes in our strength even when we cannot. David's legacy wasn't the estate or the money. It was the question he left me with. Who are you when you are free to become? Now, I'd love to hear from you. What does legacy mean in your life? Is it something you build, something you leave behind, or something you live every day? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, it is never, ever too late to rediscover who you are meant to be. The canvas is waiting, the brushes are in your hand. Be kind to yourselves
And may you all find the courage to step into the light and embrace your own magnificent possibilities.